Good evening, everyone. Does that sound okay? Everybody can hear me in the back? No? I'll just talk a little louder, maybe. How's that? Anyway, thank you for coming. I wish half of you didn't come. Only kidding. This is a wonderful turnout. Believe it or not, they originally had us in the little grasshopper room, which is a third of this size. And I guess she got some inquiries, and she called us just today to say, we're going to move into a little larger space. And I'm really glad they did. So they're just doing everything they can to help us out. We really appreciate that. So again, welcome to our February program of the Sturbridge Historical Society. Once again, as always, we are very grateful to the Public House for letting us use their space and being such gracious hosts and providing refreshments, which was enough for 20 people. And that was a long time ago. And I don't have any in my pockets. Last weekend, we had a special program. We put it out to members only, just for something different, and it was a behind-the-scenes tour of the collections at Old Sturbridge Village. We didn't know how it would go, and we had 3 tours, one at 9, 11, and 2, and they were all full, the maximum that they could take. And it was just a wonderful program. Staff members Derek and what's it? No, what's Rebecca? Brittany, and Tom brought out stuff that was related to Sturbridge history. They had some Freeman family artifacts. The Freeman farm, of course, was from Sturbridge and is in the village. They had items from the Fennell family. The Fennell building is the first one you see when you walk in, and also from the Fitch family. They had items from the Walker family, from whom Walker Pond is named. And they had items from the Wright, David Wright, Oliver Wright family. They owned the house, the big white house right in front of the village on Route 20. It's right in front of the hotel, but that was one of the original Wright brothers. They owned where the village is now. That was their farm. So they had all these items related to Sturbridge and the Old Sturbridge Village. It was fun to see, as well as a variety of other things. Let's see. For next year, 24-25, we're beginning to start coming up with programs. We encourage you to submit or offer any ideas or volunteer. We have Sandy, my wife, she puts out all the emails out. So the email address, you can contact us that way, or just come up and talk to us. But we're always planning for next year. We hope to have some good programs then. This year, this fall, who knows who Marquis Lafayette was? You ever hear that name? He was a Frenchman, young Frenchman, came over during the American Revolution and offered his services to George Washington. He served throughout the war. He was young. He was only I think 18 years old when he came here. But he and George Washington became inseparable, friends for life. I think Lafayette named one of his kids George. And anyway, he had very instrumental in helping win the American Revolution. He was also one of the youngest officers during the war. So in 1824-25, when they were beginning to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Concord, Lexington, they invited him back to the United States, and he accepted, and he had this grand tour of all the original states, and I think it was 24 at that time. So he started in New York City, he went to all the states, and he was treated like a rock star. He went to Boston, he went everywhere. But he came to Sturbridge. He came to Sturbridge on September 3rd, 1824. So this year will be the anniversary. And there's an American Friends of Lafayette organization, and they are putting together a recreation on the exact days of that tour. So they will be planning arrival of Lafayette to come to Sturbridge on September 3rd of this year. He will be arriving at the Common. There's a sign. They just posted a sign out there now, a permanent marker indicating that when he came here. He came up Charles Street. He was greeted on the Common with cannons and militia and fife and drum and everything else. Gave speeches, and then he had dinner here at the tavern. So they're going to recreate as much of that as possible. Old Sturbridge Village, the American Friends of Lafayette, and the Sturbridge Historical Society. We are coordinating and getting this together, so look forward to that, and if you'd like to volunteer, you'll have opportunities in the future, as well as coming for dinner that night. You're going to have the public house is offering a meal. Of course, you have to pay for it, but it'll be a great conclusion to that program. As you first came in, I'm jumping all over, but there's a bunch of things I have to cover. There's this poster of the 1888 Agricultural Fair in Sturbridge. It's a reproduction. We've had copies made up, and you can purchase them for $30. The donation goes to the Historical Society. It's a great poster, vivid colors, and it took place right up behind McDonald's where the host is. That's where the fairground was. It was a very big deal for a long time. We went from horses to car racing to drive-in movies to McDonald's and Burger King. A lot of history on that space. I'd like to thank Wally, our member of our society. He posts a lot of pictures. There's a Sturbridge Historical Society Facebook page, and he's always finding pictures and great information on our town. So we thank him for that, and we encourage him to keep going. And a lot of people respond with additional information, and it just makes it more interesting to see. All right, coming up the rest of this year in March 28th, our meeting will be on Thursday night. The topic is going to be Pistol Pond and the Underhammer Guns in Sturbridge. I bet you never knew that there was a big manufacturing company of guns in Sturbridge. This is in the 1830s, and it was located on a pond behind where Cracker Barrel is. That's Pistol Pond, and that's why it's called Pistol Pond, because this unique gun, Underhammer style, was made here for just a very short time, less than 10 years. So you're going to learn all about it on March 28th. April 25th, we'll have a presentation by Wally again on Sturbridge and the Civil War. On May 23rd, Wally will present another program on World War II at the Public House. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but just prior to and during World War II, there was a huge military camp right behind the Public House here. They were utilizing this building and a couple of the houses across the street for training purposes. There's photographs, and you'll learn all about that. June 8th, which I believe is a Saturday, there'll be a tour of the Sturbridge Common. Sandy Quigley will be carrying that out. It's 9 o'clock. It's about roughly an hour and a half walk around. They can meet at the bandstand at 9 o'clock on June 8th. It'll be announced in the future. If it's a rain, it's a no-go, but you're going to walk around. Because the Sturbridge Common has not changed very much in probably 150 years. So there's a lot of history within sight right now that you can see. I think that's it. Tonight, we're going to learn about stone walls in Sturbridge. Our local resident, Rich Paradis, has been an avid hiker in town. He's been a member of the Sturbridge Trails Committee for the last 13 years. He's a member of the Last Green Valley Natural Heritage Corridor, and has given talks and hikes with them, as well as led hikes for the Holland Trail Committee as well. He's studied stone walls a lot. He's got some great pictures, and he's going to tell you why people, you're probably wondering, why do they build stone walls through the woods, through the forest, all these stone walls? He'll tell you why. So, please welcome Rich Paradis.
Thank you, everyone, and I'm surprised to see such a large crowd, but I'm delighted to see such a large crowd tonight. Can everyone hear me?
No.
Okay.
Speak up.
Let's try this. Now can everyone hear me?
That's better.
Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about stone walls in Sturbridge, and no one ever built a stone wall in the middle of the woods. It was always a field. Okay, this is how I normally give stone wall talks. On a hillside, this is in Holland. The Friends of the trustees of the reservation has a property in Holland just past the dam, and it's a beautiful walk there. And we're just inside the property, is some beautiful stone walls. Behind me in this picture, I know you can't see it, but there's a excellent example of what's called a lace wall, which we will explain later in the program. This is my inspiration for stone walls. Shortly after I... What happened?
Didn't pay your bill.
I must have hit a button. I lost the feed. There we go. Thanks. Sorry, I'm not good with mechanical stuff like this. I'm much better with stone walls. Anyway, I got this as a gift right after I moved to Sturbridge in 2002, and it's by Robert Thorson. It's called Stone by Stone, and he is a professor at the University of Connecticut. He's a geology professor, and he grew up in North Dakota and Alaska, and never really saw a stone wall till he got to Yukon, and became totally fascinated with them, and he's become quite an authority. And we're both members of Last Green Valley, and I got to meet him last fall, and I have some photographs from him, and he's just an amazing guy. He really is. I always used to call him Robert Thorson, but once I met him, he's now Professor Thorson. He's very much a scholar. Stones are what stone walls are made of. There's two basic shapes of stones that stone walls are made of. There's the flat granite type of stones, and then there's the round stones. The granite stones were here already. They were underground, all over New England. There's sandstone, there's schists and granites, and this one here has been brought up by the frost. The Laurentide Glacier came through 25,000 years ago, and it started to melt about 15,000 years ago, and it brought all the round stones. So basically there's flat stones and there's round stones and walls around here. All of which were here in the first place when the settlers got here, but they were all underground. It wasn't until they plowed away the forest that the frost started bringing them up. And they brought them up so many stones, and they brought them up so fast that the early farmers thought they were brought here by the devil. Because they just couldn't imagine there was that many stones underground. So that's an example of a flat one. These are the round ones. This is a farm in Basra, Connecticut, that belongs to a friend of Professor Thorson, and he maintains a number of stone walls. Can you see over there? No, I'm sorry. I don't mean to block, but he maintains a number of stone walls on this property, and the professor brings students there and teaches outdoors. So that's Professor Thorson of Yukon, and he's got some stones on that granite pillar right there. I don't know what they are, but he does. And you can see some stone walls in the background of this picture. Let's see. And there's the professor and I. It turns out we know a lot of the same people because we're both longtime supporters of Last Green Valley. So we hit it off quite well and had a wonderful day. This is a stone wall in Sturbridge, not Connecticut. So this is up off of Lead Mine Road. There's a trail. There's a parking lot at 197 Lead Mine Road where you can park and hike the trails. This is on the Cow Style Trail. And it's a really nice example of a stone wall. And yes, I know it's out in the woods, and nobody ever built stone walls out in the woods. But this used to be all pasture. The professor divides stones for walls up into 4 categories. He calls them one-handers, two-handers, assisted stones, which are the ones on the bottom, where it takes 2 people or 2 people and whatever to move them. The 4th type of stone is called a leave-it. That's a leave-it. This is at, if you go up Stallion Hill Road, past the entrance to the village, and take a right on Doughty Road, just a few hundred feet down Doughty Road, this is the corner of the old Barrett farm that's up on Doughty Road, and the stone wall runs right into that leave-it, and it's actually part of the wall. There's another wall behind it that comes out from it, and the road has a little zigzag right there because when they built the road, they just looked at the stone and said, no, let's leave this one. So yes, that is a leave-it, and it's a very nice example of a leave-it. This is a collapsed wall along that same trail. I believe this was what they call a lace wall. There's not a lot of stones in this picture because there weren't a lot of stones in lace walls. They were very rickety, they were piled very unsteady, and the stones on them rocked around on purpose because sheep don't like to climb lace walls. And for a period from about 1810 to about 1840, there was a real interest in sheep farming in this area. I have it in my notes here. In 1808, Napoleon invaded Spain. Spain had a lock on the merino sheep, which have a very fine, very nice wool. It's not itchy like regular wool. And the Spanish royalty got all the money for this. Well, when Napoleon invaded Spain in 1808, he needed money to finance his war, so he sold sheep all over. There was a man who was the, pardon me, it's really dry in here. There was a gentleman who was the U.S. ambassador to Portugal, which is right next to Spain, who had a farm in Vermont. And he imported, over the next 5 years, 4,000 merino sheep to his farm in Vermont. By 1840, there were 1.7 million merino sheep in Vermont, and there were 600,000 in New Hampshire. I don't have good numbers for Massachusetts, any numbers that I believe, so unfortunately I just don't have those. Connecticut had about 4 million merino sheep. And then about 1845, the market for the wool just died out. The price dropped. There was a brief revival in 1865 for the Civil War, but then again the price dropped after that. The village has 2 herds of hybrid merino sheep. They're bred with local sheep because the merinos don't do so well in the New England winters. So they breed them with local sheep to try and make them a little hardier. The merinos have to be kept in barns in the winter because they just can't deal with the cold, even though they have that wonderful wool on them. They can't deal with the cold. So that is a collapsed lace wall. There are better pictures later on. This is also from the farm in Connecticut, Bowser, Connecticut. This is what most stone wall fences looked like back in the 1830s and 40s. Underneath the ferns, you can see some rubble. This is called a rubble wall, basically. It's just a linear pile of stones at the edge of a field. They would build a split rail fence over it to keep the cattle and sheep and other whatever animals they wanted in or out of the field, particularly if it was a crop field. They'd want to keep the animals out of it. That's what most stone walls look like, but they don't survive very long because they're never treated with anything. You can see a sign there on the, this is one of the exhibits that the professor uses to teach people about stone walls. This is on Route 169, just over the Connecticut line. I know it's not in Sturbridge, but I was running out of good shots. This is just a really nice example of this. This wall has been restacked. There's another wall behind it that's holding up the earth. You can see by the tree up on top that it's a retaining wall, and there is another wall behind it. But this one here was put in. It's a single stacked wall, which is also a type of stone wall, a single stack, and it's just really decorative. It was built by somebody who really knew what they were doing. It's just a lovely wall. This is a hillside wall, also in Sturbridge, also up off of Lead Mine Road. These stone walls out in the woods don't do well. They get trees land on them, like you can see this one here. They get roots growing up through them, and it just knocks the stones around. This one survives quite well because it was built extremely well. You can see up by the tree, that the stones in the wall actually look like they're tipping upward, which is on purpose because it helps the stones defy gravity so they don't slide down the hillside, because gravity just wants to pull them down, so they build it on a slight angle. This is just a really nice example of a hillside stone wall, which is also another kind of stone wall. There's amazing amounts of stone walls. This is, I'm sure you all recognize this, this is our cemetery in town, right next to the center school. It's right around the corner from where we are now. That's Route 131 in the picture. This is a double stacked wall. The walls there was two stone walls next to each other that angled toward each other, and they met at the top. And the space in between the lower parts of the wall was filled with just rubble stone. And this particular wall has wonderful capstones on top. And if you think those look like that when they first get them, they don't. You have to chisel them to look like that. It's a lot of work. But this is a gorgeous wall. And it was, it's a real gem in our town. This is another view of the wall. It's those round lichens that you see on the stones. Those grow about an inch every 100 years. So you can date a wall by looking at those lichens. This wall here is about 250 years old, and you can tell by the lichens that it is that old. Walls like this are extremely valuable. People try to steal the stones from them all the time. It's really awful. We discovered that on the trail committee, that people were stealing our walls. And it's just a horrible thing. But people want stone walls, and they put a couple nice stones on the top, and it makes it look like an old wall. And this is just another shot of the cemetery entrance, and it's just a beautiful plaque that was put up. It has nothing to do with stone walls, but I thought you'd enjoy it because it's just so pretty. This is also in Sturbridge. This is an unusual thing. You don't see this too often on a stone wall. This is called a cow stile because sheep can go through it, sheepdogs can go through it, cows cannot. So it blocks the cows from going through the wall, and you can easily block it to keep the sheep in one side or the other. And that is also a lace wall. It's collapsed a little, but it is definitely a lace wall. I have a better shot of it on the next slide. It's a lot closer to it. You'll notice that on the right side of that capstone up top, there's a small stone there that's put in there. That's to make it rock when you lean on it. And it's done on purpose. And there's another one over here on the left side of it that's leaning against the stone, and that one rocks on purpose because sheep will put their paws on there and they won't climb it because they're afraid they'll injure themselves. So these, if you see stone walls out in the woods that look really rickety, they're that way on purpose. They're called lace walls, and quite a lot of them were built between 1810 and 1840 to keep the sheep in the fields. They usually worked. Not always. This is also another one in Connecticut in the farm in Basra that the professor teaches at. This is a pass-through for a person, and usually the wood has long since rotted away, but the owner keeps it renewed every now and then, just so you can see what it looks like. It's a really nice picture of a wall, and especially the railing, so that way you don't have to worry about it when it's icy. You don't have to worry about falling. This right here, the last couple of slides here have nothing to do with stone walls, but they're things that you're likely to see when you're out looking at stone walls. This is kind of a rare object. I've been studying stone walls for 20 years. I've only found 2 of these. This is called a cairn, and it was built by a surveyor. They couldn't put, it's really difficult to put a hole in a stone that size. There were no drills back then, so what they would do is they would build a cairn. The lowest stone on the cairn has been chipped away to fit the boulder that it's on. This is the corner of somebody's property. And then some smaller stones have been piled on top, and no surveyor will ever touch one of those because it's like a little gold mine to a surveyor. Some of you may have seen them out in the woods, but they're very rare. This one is on the Mid-State Trail just south of Rutland, if anybody happens to be up that way. This is another one. This one is in Sturbridge. This one is off of Lead Mine Road in Sturbridge. And I have a map of the property right up here if you'd like to look at it later. Marked out where the cairn is on the property. And for paperweights, I have pins and feathers. These are used to split stone. You drill a hole, a half-inch hole in the stone, you drop these in, and you tap the center wedge, and you get every 6 inches you put one of those pins and feathers, and you just keep going down the stone and tapping them, and you listen for the sound. And eventually the stone just pops apart. It's almost magical to see it happen. It's pretty cool. I've managed to cut a few stones that way. But that's another cairn that's right here in town. This is also something you may see in your stone wall walking. This is a state line marker. One side says Connecticut, the other side says Mass on it. They're not that hard to spot. You can see them from the highway sometimes. But it's an interesting thing to see. And about 4 miles to the east of where this one is, there is a stone called the Tri-State Marker. It's between Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. It's the Tri-State Marker. And according to Professor Thorson, if you draw a 50-mile circle around that Tri-State Marker, there are more stone walls in that area than there are anywhere else in the entire country. According to the professor, there were, in 1840, approximately 250,000 miles of stone walls in New England. They go from, western Maine doesn't have a lot of them, eastern Maine does because of the topography. And they stop about where the Hudson River is because the stones are too soft there. The glacier just ground them down to nothing. one of the things that puzzled me about stone walls when I was studying them is why did the stones come up from the ground? When they tore the surface away, the duff on the forest floor, that's a really good insulator of the ground. And what I didn't realize was when the ground freezes and it hits a stone, the stone transfers the freezing all the way down to the bottom of the stone. So the bottom of the stone starts to freeze the earth underneath it before the sides freeze. So it pushes the stone up about a half an inch to an inch every year. And if you do that over 2 or 3 generations, you get a lot of stones. A real lot of stones. That's why there's so many stones around here. Because they just kept coming up every year. They go out and it must have been very disheartening to go out and every year there's more stones. And stone walls were basically somewhere to put the stones. They ended up being property lines. I have them on deeds, and there's stone walls on this deed up here. They just kept coming up. Nobody knew what to do with them, so they built walls. This is one of the last things you'll see out on the. This has nothing to do with stone walls either, but it's a fun thing to find in the woods. You find these on pieces of ledge. This is a U.S. geologic marker. The arrow on it points north, and it has a number stamped on it. Each one is an individual. And there's a reference book somewhere in Washington that has all of these markers on it. They're used for mapping the United States. This because of the number on there, it has a known geographic location, and as important, it has a known elevation. So it's a pretty cool thing to find out in the woods. I'm trying to keep this a little short because it's warm in here. I don't want to lose anybody. So this is my presentation. Does anybody have any questions? If you'd like, there's a book up here. There's a map with one of those cairns on it, and you're welcome to come up and look. And thank you all for coming tonight. I enjoyed speaking to you.
Richard?
I didn't hear anybody, but
Anybody have any questions you want to ask Rich?
yes.
Richard, one of the things you should point out, these stones are all dry. There's no masonry, there's no concrete, there's nothing holding them together other than the stones.
The only one that had masonry on it was the post at the cemetery. Everything else was all dry laid. It takes enormous skill to do that and a very strong back. Any other questions? Oh, yes. I'm sorry, I didn't see you by the phone.
I was, houses that are built on granite sills.
Yes.
What period would that be from?
Anytime from about 1740 on, because those were
1740.
yes, those were quarried. The granite foundations were quarried. They would find natural ledge outcroppings of granite, and they would drill them, and they would use these things here, the pins and feathers, to, in fact, at the village, if you look in front of some of the barns at the village and some of the houses at the village, you'll see big stone lintels on the ground and steps on the ground, and they have small round holes in them where they split the stone with these wedges, these steel wedges. They have these at the village. They don't look that nice, but they have them at the village. But yeah, no, those are quarried stones. So those, I haven't seen any references to any before about 1740, but it's possible there were some. Also, one thing I forgot to mention is the oldest stone wall we know of in New England is just west of Portland, Maine, and it was built in 1607, which is a long time ago. It was a failed, it was like Plymouth Plantation, but it never made it. It was the wrong location. They couldn't farm there. But there's still a stone wall there. Anyone else?
There's another question right here.
Sure.
Do you have a map where, if we wanted to go searching for some of these
walls. If you go to the town, there's a town website with all our trails on it. I'm a member of the trail committee. And at the kiosks, which are these little roofed-in areas, there's maps in the kiosks.
Are they identifying these locations?
They don't identify these locations, they just identify the trails so people don't get lost.
Right.
But there's stone walls all over the place. It's almost impossible not to run into a stone wall when you're out on the trail.
That's true. But wouldn't it be nice to have, I mean, I'm sure this is only a small portion.
This is a minuscule portion.
So wouldn't it be fun to have a map that identifies and locates?
The problem is most stone walls are on private land,
Well, I
so you can't really get access to most of them. So these pictures are all ones you can access. They're on trails, either trails in town or trails in parts of Massachusetts. Some of these are on the mid-state, the rest of them are on trails in town. Because again, most stone walls are on private land. Yes.
I am on the board of Opaque Land Trust.
Oh, good for you.
And this sort of thing is extremely interesting because lots of people, I'm sure, walk the Opaque trails that we have in this
Yes.
area.
Yes.
And I'm just thinking about the interest that we could create for maybe even a, what do you call it, a hunt. So that would be, yeah.
Like a scavenger hunt for stone walls. Okay. Sure. Anyone else? Sure. Sir?
Even though nowadays these stone walls are surrounded by trees, is it logical to assume that when they were built in the 18-something or other, all of that was open space and farmland?
In 1840, 70% of New England was clear cut. Right now, 75% of New England is forested. So that's why there's so many stone walls in the woods. A lot of soldiers didn't come back from the Civil War for a variety of reasons. A lot of them got killed. A lot of them were in areas and they were so amazed there's no stones in the ground. Let's farm here. So a lot of them just never came back. So a lot of farms were abandoned between about 1870 and about 1920. A lot of farms were abandoned in New England, and that's why there's so many stone walls out in the middle of the woods, because it was never woods. It was 70% clear cut.
Richard,
Yes.
in the back.
Oh,
For
yes.
for the people that are looking to see where stone walls are located, if
Yeah.
you go on Mass GIS, on their website, they
Mass
have
GIS?
resources. It's the GIS site for the state of Massachusetts. And you can look under the LiDAR section.
Yes, I've
And when
seen
you
that.
look at the LiDAR, the stone walls just pop right out of the ground.
Yes.
And
LiDAR is a ground radar that sees through the trees, and you can see stone walls even if there's leaves on the trees. It's like a it's like a topographical map almost that you can photograph from an airplane. It's called LiDAR. And they use it a lot. That's how they got some of their estimates for stone walls, is by poor grad students going over LiDAR. So, yes.
If you're interested, General Moore State Park in Paxton,
Mhm.
Massachusetts, has beautiful trails.
General
General Moore.
Moore State Park in
O-R-E.
Paxton.
And I believe they have the highest freestanding stone wall as the foundation for a grist mill on the site.
Wow.
And it's magnificent. It's just magnificent.
Yeah, that does sound nice. The town pound, I meant to mention this earlier, the town pound at Old Sturbridge Village, it has an unusually beautiful stone wall around it, and it's very tall because that was used to capture animals that escaped all the other walls. That's why it's so tall, and that's why it's such a good wall, because they would lock them in there and you had to pay a fine to get your animals back. Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, if you could speak on the round stones a little bit. Is that caused by the glaciers?
Yes.
When they were receding?
A glacier takes about 12 to 15,000 years to melt. The Laurentide Glacier from Quebec is actually still there in Quebec. It never melted. There's remnants of it up there. So the shoreline changes every year. It moves back a few inches. And so those are rounded by waves and water, and that's why they're round. And sometimes they get started rounding with the ice rolling over them. But that's why there's two different shapes. The stones that were already here are flat because they're granite, and they never got rounded because they were under the soil. And the glacial till, they call it, stones are rounded from the wave action mostly. This right where we're standing used to be a beach at one time, 10,000 years ago. No, probably longer now, probably 12 or 13. Because that's when the stone up on the Leavitt stone that I showed you, that's been there for somewhere between 12 and 13,000 years on that one spot. Because it's sitting on ledge, so it never went anywhere. And it didn't sink into the ground.
I grew up in southern Connecticut, and as a kid, I used to love to make stone walls. I could never make them more than this high, because every rock in southern Connecticut is
Is
shaped like a
round.
basketball or a softball. So you can't do anything with. I love the rocks around here. I love
Yes, the flat stones are much easier to build walls with. The poet Robert Frost once said that the round stones almost need a spell to get them to balance. Yes, sir.
Before the Industrial Revolution or during it, many of the brooks were dammed up.
Yes.
And you find some very nice, very old dams made out of stone.
Stones, yes. There's quite a number of them in Connecticut. There's one, we have a trail called the Sawmill Trail. It's up behind, it's about 3/4 of a mile from the trailhead on Lead Mine Road, 197 Lead Mine Road. And there's a sawmill there on the trail that was excavated by Old Sturbridge Village. Ed Hood, I think, led the excavation on that. And it's pretty fascinating. The stonework there is just amazing. It's beautiful. Yes?
In West Brookfield, there is a brook's very small brook that has a dam on it, and it raises up 18 feet above, and it was built in 1884 to supply water for the fountain that is in the middle of the common in West Brookfield.
Wow.
And that dam is 1 mile away from the fountain.
And it's piped for
it's
a mile?
piped down in 1884 to the center of the common.
And it's still standing. The dam is still there.
I'm sorry?
The dam is still there, still
The
intact.
dam is still there and it's still holding water.
In the center of Sturbridge on Route 20 is the old Snell manufacturing plant. It's the yellow building now where they have
Yankee Peddler.
Yankee Peddler, thank you. I couldn't think of the name. That used to be Snell Manufacturing, where they made auger bits. And they're up on top of the ridge behind there is a fire pond, and it's piped down to the mill so they could put fires out because they had a blacksmith shop in there, and the place used to burn down every now and then. So there's also a town trail that goes up to the fire pond.
It's called the cistern.
Yes, it's called the Cistern Trail, and some people in town call it the meteor crater because it actually looks a little like a meteor crater. Anyone else have a question on here? Yes. I don't know why they called it a lace wall.
I know why.
Because
You know
lace-
why?
Yes, because they were so loosely constructed that you could see daylight through.
Yes, you could. That was the whole idea. That's why the sheep wouldn't climb on them. So it was so you could see daylight through them. That I didn't know. I just knew they were called lace walls. Thank you.
Way in the back, I saw you didn't go up somewhere.
Yes.
I've noticed a number of stone walls on very uneven ground, on a highly graded ground.
Yes.
And I have trouble imagining anybody lugging those stones up that incline, or farming up, or having gardens up in that area, because there's not level ground around there.
No, there isn't. Have you ever been up in Vermont and seen some of the pastures up there?
No.
They say the cows have shorter legs on one side because the hillsides are so steep. They had to get rid of the stones somewhere, and most of the steeper hillsides were all pasture land. And you had to keep your animals in, because if they didn't, they'd end up in the town pound, and you had to pay to get them out again. So, yeah, they built a lot of stone walls in some very nasty places. Yes.
We have several stone walls on our property, they're all about the same height, not much more than knee high.
Yes, there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Because that's as high as you can lift a stone without hurting your back. Yes. The knee high is about as high as you can lift a heavy stone without really hurting yourself. So most stone walls were only knee high, and they had the split rail fences on top of them.
Where ours, many of them have the 2 layers with the
Yes.
which is really neat, when I tried to rebuild one of them along the road.
Yes.
Not very successfully, but
They're harder than they look to build.
they are
Yeah.
very hard. But what they do with all the extra stones, would they make the wall lighter?
Sometimes they did, yes. I've seen stone walls that have been 5 feet wide, just to get rid of the stones. Glad you enjoyed it, sir. Okay. What? I'm sorry, I can't see.
I was on Route 31 in Princeton one time, on the eastern side of Mount Wachusett.
Mm-hmm.
And my buddy says, "You're not gonna believe this stone wall I found." So we walked into the woods. It was perfectly straight. It was probably a half a mile long. Without exaggerating, it was at the base maybe 20 feet wide, and it was like 6 or 8 feet tall, straight as an arrow, and it just ended. It didn't do anything. It wasn't a property line or anything that I could tell. It was ridiculous. It was as high as the ceiling, 10 feet wide at the base.
A stone wall like that is called a dress wall. And it was usually in front of somebody's house who had a lot of money and could afford to have somebody build it for him. The stone wall around the cemetery here in town is also called a dress wall.
It was just crazy because it was so lost out there in the middle of the woods.
Right. But you don't build a wall like that for no reason. Somebody got paid to do it. Somebody got paid a lot to do it.
Fairly small round stuff.
Yes. Okay, one more.
What was the status of wall builders, like stone wall builders? I mean, I know a lot of it was do-it-yourself, you were the farmer, but there must have been people who did it as a profession?
Yes, there were people who did it as a profession, but most of the time it was part-time work. Because when there was, it was a lot of farm workers when late spring, late spring, late autumn, just before the ground froze, because you can't put them on frozen ground because they fall down when the ground froze out. They would 2 or 3 days a year, 2 or 3 days in the fall, 2 or 3 days in the spring, they built stone walls. So yeah, it was a regular thing that happened all the time. But over generations, you get a lot of stone wall. You get 250,000 miles of it over generations. Anyone else?
Thank you. One quick point. Richard mentioned the animal pound at Old Sturbridge Village. That's that stone corral. They were very common. There's the original one. There's one in Brookfield. There's one in Rutland, Barry, and in Charlton. You know where the Charlton Cemetery is, just down from the center of town? If you're driving toward the, what's the college there?
Bay Path.
Bay Path. You look on the right, on the corner of the cemetery, there's an animal pound. The walls are about this tall, and it's the original site, the original pound that was built to keep the animals in. So, again, thank you. And it's March 28th, the program for Underhammer Pistols and Sturbridge. Please come and join us for that. And thank you for coming, and thank you for filling the room.
Yeah.